Hi, I'm Amy Ronshausen. I'm the Executive Director of Drug Free America Foundation. Drug Free is a global and national drug policy and prevention organization, and we are headquartered in St. Petersburg, Florida. Today, I'm here to talk to you about prevention in a changing marijuana landscape. So some of the things we're going to cover during this session, I'm going to give you an overview of the U.S. current policy landscape. So like I said, I'm located in the US, so I'm going to show you a little bit about what our experience has been when it comes to marijuana policy, and I'm going to show you some examples from the state levels as well. We're going to talk about some of the current products and how these products are marketed. We're going to talk a little bit about the impacts to youth, specifically mental health, and then cover some of the challenges and strategies moving forward as preventionists. So first, I kind of want to go over just the terminology that I'm going to use, because I know that sometimes these can mean different things, and in different aspects that might not be as familiar. So when I use the word marijuana, I use this because this is the legal terminology here in the US with the federal level and according to our state statutes. It's the same as cannabis. I just use the term marijuana because that's our legal terminology. When we talk about medical marijuana, this means that at the state level, either through the legislative process or through the ballot initiative, a territory has legalized the use and possession and sale of marijuana as a medicine. This does not mean that it's gone through our FDA system, our Food and Drug Administration, for approval as other medications have. This just means it was approved through legislation or through ballot initiative. When we talk about low THC marijuana, that means marijuana that's low in THC, which is the hallucinogenic effect, the part of the plant that gets you high. And it's usually higher in CBD, which is the cannabidiol. So each state in the US differs on how they define low THC, but most of them are anywhere between 2 and 3% or less of THC, and anywhere from 8 to 10% more of CBD in the plant. When we talk about recreational legalization, this means the state, either through the ballot initiative process or through their legislation, has legalized the use, the sale, the possession, the cultivation, and the distribution of marijuana for recreational purposes outside of the so-called medical use that the states have previously done. And then we already talked about CBD, that's cannabidiol, and it's a part of the marijuana plant, a component of the marijuana plant. It's one of the components that's studied the most because it's found to have some medicinal qualities. And in the US, it's kind of de facto legalized through our Federal Farm Act. So we have these products now on the market in each state. So although I'm going to be talking about what different states have done and what the landscape looks like in the US, I want you to keep in mind that marijuana is still a Schedule I drug at our federal level. So that means that it is still an illicit drug. It's still illegal to possess, manufacture, and sell at the federal level. However, the states have bypassed that federal system, and at this point have been allowed to operate within the laws of their state. So when you look at the landscape in the US, and this is just a quick map, I'm not going to test you on this, you see the different colors. These are all the different marijuana policies that are in place. The darkest green shows the states that have full legalized recreational marijuana. The next to the darker green means that they have a medical marijuana program, and they have also decriminalized, which means that they look at small amounts of possession like they would a civil penalty, like a traffic ticket. We have the Kelly green color is states that have legalized as a medicine. The lime green color is more states that have decriminalized, like I said, as a civil penalty. And then the white states where it says that it would be fully illegal, that's a little tricky. I have CBD in 4 of those states, as you will see, and that means that they have legalized CBD products. The only state that you see up here that has nothing is the state of Idaho. So our legislators in Idaho passed a statute that says as long as marijuana remains illegal at the federal level, the state is not allowed to pass any kind of ballot initiatives or statutes that would go against that. So that's really our only state out of all of the US who doesn't have any of these policies in place. So that kind of gives you a look at where we are policy-wise in the US. So who is big marijuana and what are they selling? Because make no mistake, this is a huge industry in the United States and in North America altogether. And I know that many other countries around the world are watching what the United States and what Canada are doing, and some have already started to move forward in their process. So I hope that this presentation will give you just a better look on what it actually looks like at the community level when marijuana is legalized and what those impacts are to our youth and how we move forward as preventionists. So there's a whole bunch of people that are involved in the marijuana industry now. You have celebrities, you have film directors, you have rappers. The young girl in the corner used to be a Disney princess on the Disney Channel, and they're selling products across the board. We've got wines, we got products that can be vaped, we've got products that can be smoked, we have products that can be used as beverages. And then we also have beauty products. And then you have your players who, if you know these people, you would assume that they would be involved in the marijuana industry. We have, of course, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa, Cheech and Chong, the Blues Brothers, and they're all putting out their different brands, to get an edge in this market. And they're selling, like I said, all kinds of things. So as you look at these pictures, I want you to keep in mind, some of them you just are shocked to see, I'm sure, but look at it through your lens of how easily this could be used in the workplace, also in schools. So if somebody isn't using marijuana in the traditional way of smoking a joint and you don't have that stench, that telltale smell sign of use, it's really hard to notice. So if they have a candy bar or a granola bar or a cookie, some of the products that you see here, and they, put them in different wrappers or packages, the use would go undetected until you see that they are under the influence. And it isn't just edible products. We also have drinks. So if you're thirsty, we have lemonades, organic lemonades that are infused with marijuana, different juice drinks, different energy drinks. And also the alcohol industry is now involved in this as well. So this is recently came out last year around this time, Molson Coors introduced a lineup of infused beverages in Canada. So these are some products that are available there as well. So, like with most substance use, we see that this is crossing, this isn't something that's a single use. It can cross the lines and be used with other substances as well. And then we also have syrups. So if you will recall, a big trend in the adolescent world was using different cough syrups and they were calling them triple C's and different things that they were doing with over-the-counter medication. So the marijuana industry is taking advantage of this trend in youth use when it comes to what we would call club drugs, and they have created syrups that are marijuana infused and different flavors. Here you see green apple, fruit punch, watermelon. So these can be put into other things that you're eating or drinking, but also it's marketing toward that crowd that was using these club drugs and things like that. So why do we even care about these products? In the US and in other places, when it comes to, products that aren't harmful to our health, we're for free market. We think that everybody should be able to have a piece of the pie. The more products, the better. But when it comes to these products that are obviously, super dangerous when it comes to public health and public safety, we have to be a little more concerned about how they're sold in the marketplace. And we're concerned about this because we see that data from the National Poison System here in the US from 2005 to 2011, they looked at data coming in and they saw that decriminalization, and in this particular report, they defined decriminalization as the legalization of marijuana in different states. And it was associated with increased reports of unintended exposure to kids and a 30% increase per year of marijuana-related calls to poison control. And when we looked at states that were transitioning into this decriminalization phase, they had an average increase of a little over 11% per year when you looked at states that weren't moving into that policy thing. So marijuana-related cost of poison control centers in non-legal states only showed an average increase of a little more than 1%, 1.5% per year during that same time period. And some of this makes a lot of sense, right? You saw some of those products. If we look back at those cookies and candies and soda pops, you can really understand how there would be an increase in unintended exposure, because let's face it, a cookie is a cookie to a 3-year-old. They're not going to understand that this particular cookie has something that might be dangerous to my health in it. They're just going to grab that bag of candy or grab that cookie that might have been left on the counter by an adult, and they're going to be exposed to these possible high levels of THC that are in these products. We also see that the use of edibles is more prevalent in medical marijuana states. Again, this makes sense because you have a market, you have a competition between the different stores that are selling these products. And with any business, you're always trying to get a leg up on your competitors. We see that almost 30% of adults who use marijuana now report consuming it in an edible or beverage form. Again, this is just an easier way and a better way to be undetected when you're using these products. So again, as you see these pictures, really think about the implications to the workplace and to school. And this is where marijuana is sold in the US. So different states have different laws on what these places can look like, but we call them dispensaries. Some of these pictures are from Michigan. We have some pictures from Colorado, some pictures from California. So you can see they are, really promoting what they're selling. And these are things that you have to pass on your way to taking your kids to school or on your way to go out to dinner. So these are conversations you need to be prepared to have with any adolescents that might, see these things on the way to wherever it is that they're going. And you can see some of the names of them: House of Dank, G-Spots, Puff Detroit. They're not hiding what they're selling here. It's very obvious what their goal is and what the product is that they're selling. And then in some states, these are actually pictures that I took in my neighborhood here in St. Petersburg, Florida. We, when our laws passed that allowed the sale of marijuana as a medicine, we did restrict through the legislature what these buildings could look like and how they could advertise. So you see there is a stark difference between these two buildings here and the buildings that you saw in these slides here. If you didn't know that these were dispensaries, it wouldn't be obvious right away. So a little bit better when it comes to protecting our youth when looking at marketing and things. And just to give you an example of how prevalent these shops are, I want to give you an example from Colorado, which was one of our first states to legalize recreational marijuana. So I know that two places that are abundant everywhere I travel in the world are McDonald's and Starbucks. You can barely drive or walk a mile without seeing at least one of these stores. So I think we all can understand how prevalent Starbucks and McDonald's are. So look at these numbers from Colorado. In Colorado, they have 497 medical marijuana dispensaries and 369 recreational dispensaries, because in the state of Colorado, they can't be the same store. So if they are in the same building, they would have to have separate entrances. So when you look at that compared to the amount of Starbucks stores and compared to the amount of McDonald's stores, you can imagine how easy it must be and to get these accessibility and where it's at in the community is just as prevalent as where we find our Starbucks and McDonald's. And this is information that you can find out pretty easily. What I did is I Googled an app called Weed Maps, and Weed Maps will tell you where all the dispensaries are in a certain location. And that's how I counted all of these dispensaries. And then I also just kind of went online and Googled Starbucks and figured out how many there were, figured out how many McDonald's there are. So this is something that is easy to do in your community, just to kind of really show how prevalent these shops are once they're allowed to be in place. And why do we care about these numbers? So research has showed us that past month use is higher in states that allow for the distribution of medical marijuana or marijuana through storefront dispensaries. And not only that, the density of these locations are associated with a greater number of hospitalizations. So for every one dispensary and a per square mile in a zip code, it was associated with a 6.8% increase in the number of hospitalizations that were coded with a marijuana abuse or dependence code. And again, this makes sense, but glad to have the data and the research to back it up. If it's legal and there's allowed to be more opportunity for retail sales, again, you're going to have competition between entrepreneurs, and that's going to cause more access and availability, which is going to cause more use across the board. We also have seen, like I said, the availability through dispensaries and delivery services, because there's also delivery services at the city level, is positively related to the current use and higher frequency of use. What we have found is when we work at the local level to put a ban or a restrict number on how many of these dispensaries can operate within a certain community or city, that does seem to show a sufficient means to restrain the overall levels of marijuana use within the cities. So again, if you have 100 dispensaries operating within one zip code, you're probably going to have a lot of advertising, you're going to have a lot of marketing, you're going to have a lot of pressure for sales, more than you would if you only had one or two operating within the zip code. So something that we can do policy-wise as preventionists is work with our local lawmakers to limit the number that are allowed to operate within a zip code. And if we look currently at the Florida program, so again, this is where I live, so I just kind of wanted to show you what was going on here. I looked at 2 weeks that were a year apart. So when you look at last week in May, first week of June of 2021 and 2022, here are our numbers. So you have to register to get a marijuana card in the state of Florida. And last year we had 569,450 card holders. In 1 year, that number increased 28%. Last year, we had 2,542 physicians who were able to write recommendations for marijuana. This year, that number has decreased by 11% because we've put a little bit more regulations on who can make these recommendations. You see that the number of our dispensaries has increased 28% in the last year. And the three numbers that I'm the most concerned about are these bottom numbers. So we track the milligrams of THC, the milligrams of CBD, and the ounces of smoked marijuana that are sold in a 1 week period through our dispensaries in the state of Florida. And I double checked these numbers because they're so outrageous to me. You can see how much is being sold. So in 1 week in the state of Florida, our 436 dispensaries sold more than 8 80 million ounces of marijuana in a 1 week period, which is a 20% increase over last year. So it's a lot is out there, which could lead somebody to believe that a lot is out there being diverted to non-medical use or to youth who aren't allowed to be using under the law. So I've showed you where these products are sold at. I've showed you how they're being sold and what's being sold. So now I want to talk about a little bit about how it's being marketed. So social media is a huge part of our marketing of marijuana here in the US. The products are marketed on social media, and there's many ads on social media just promoting this culture of marijuana use and this, the spirit of marijuana use. So these are some that I took from my own social media page. So these are dispensaries that are operating here in the state of Florida. You can see on the one picture, you have a marijuana bud zooming with his friends, like we've all been doing while we're trying to be physically distanced but socially connected. So they were taking advantage of that theme as well and reminding you to tag your best bud and make sure that you're staying connected. They take advantage of different holidays. So we have St. Patrick's Day. They wanted to let you know that they have a new Irish cream flavored chocolate bar and chocolate drinks just in time for St. Patrick's Day. You see below here, can't recall if that is Bert or Ernie. I believe that it's Bert from Sesame Street. So this isn't legal for kids to use in the state of Florida. So who are they marketing to with Sesame Street characters? And by the way, this is illegal for them to do in the state of Florida. They're not supposed to use any kind of cartoon characters or anything that would be marketing toward youth, but nobody's enforcing these laws. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, this is probably the one that gets to me the most. This is one that came out at Christmas time. And, we all know the tradition of leaving out milk and cookies for Santa as he comes on Christmas Eve. And here they have a vial of THC that they're reminding you to make sure you leave out the marijuana for Santa as he comes to deliver the toys as well. And again, you have to wonder, who exactly are they marketing this to? They take advantage of all of the different holidays. This is our Labor Day holiday here in the US. And they have discounts where you can get, if you buy 3, you get 1 free. If you buy, they have joints that you can buy 3, get 1 free, and that amount accumulates the more that you buy. The bottom picture here is shatter. So that is the extraction of THC from the plant, and it's very high potency, could be anywhere up to 80% THC. And it's processed through butane hash oil processing, the way that they do it. And then also we have mobile medical marijuana units. So if you can't make it to one of the physicians, this can roll up into your neighborhood. And when they open this door, you can meet with somebody via telehealth who then can get you your recommendation. Again, most of this advertising and definitely that mobile unit is against Florida statutes, but not being enforced. This is here in St. Petersburg, where I live. This is a local music festival, and they have a pop-up tent, and they're showing you the different plans. So this festival was not an adult-only festival. This was actually a family-friendly music festival. They had a lot of kid activities like jumping bouncy houses and all kinds of different carnival-type rides and things. And this was just plopped right there in the middle, advertising the different plans that they have. And as you will see, some of the people standing in line to find out also have their beers. So, this isn't what you would typically think of when you think of medicine and patients, a pop-up tent at a music festival. But this is what our youth is seeing. And, in Florida, we have beautiful beaches. And this is what we now see on the skylines of our beaches. So when you take your family to the beach and you're laying out there and enjoying time in the ocean, You see these blimps appearing over Tampa Bay, our beautiful shorelines that are often packed with spring breakers or youth any time of the year because our weather is so wonderful here. Again, both of these advertisements are illicit under Florida law, but nobody is enforcing them. The top one says, like weed, get it legal. So again, we only have medical marijuana in the state of Florida. So when did we just start determining what's medically needed by if you like using it illicitly? So these are just kind of different unsolicited internet pop-up ads that appear on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, but then also physical things that we see flying through our air that we can't avoid. Then they took advantage of COVID as well. So these were some ads that I found in Washington and also in Colorado. So they wanted you to, so if you recall, when we kind of locked everything down and only businesses that were needed, like grocery stores and doctor's offices and things like that were shut down. So, you know, here in the US, and I'm sure it was like this many other places, like our physical fitness places were closed down, our community centers were closed down. And these are things that are really important for our mental and physical health, right? But guess what wasn't shut down? Marijuana dispensaries. So they were deemed a necessity. And if you couldn't get there, you could get your products delivered. So they have safe, touchless delivery. And then when it was time to get our vaccines, Washington State was associating marijuana use with health, and they were calling it joints for jabs. So if you went in and got your COVID vaccine, this particular dispensary was handing out free joints. So this is just another way to normalize this behavior, this product that is harmful to our mental health, to our physical health, and to our public health and safety. But they jump on that health bandwagon as an opportunity to normalize and to put their profits over people's well-being. We have a lot of billboards. So these are different billboards that are seen throughout the US and states that have legalized. They play off of popular marketing brands that, so about a decade ago, we had a big marketing thing for milk, and it was called Got Milk. So this is Got Dabs. They're playing off of that for a generation who knew what that was. You see that they're tagging themselves onto different social movements. So on the bottom here, you see the marijuana MedMen, which is a dispensary here, and they're connecting themselves with the Pride movement. As with the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry, they use sex to sell. You see the two scantily clad ladies in their bathing suits up at the top. And then also a reminder that medical marijuana can be delivered, because if you're too hungover to go out the next day, but you need your marijuana, don't worry, they can deliver it for you. So we have some information on what this exposure means to our youth. So in California, they did a really great survey. They looked at 6,500 racially and ethnically diverse students from 16 different middle schools in Southern California who went on to attend more than 200 different high schools in the region. They first looked at, surveyed these youth in 2010. And at that time, around 25% reported seeing these medical marijuana billboards in the past 3 months. In 2017, that number was up to 70%. So they see what's happening in the communities. But what does that mean? So these teens who reported seeing these ads said that they were more likely to have used marijuana in the previous 30 days. They were more likely, they said they were more likely to, that they expected to use within the next 6 months, and that they expressed more positive beliefs about marijuana use, such as agreeing that marijuana could help them relax, that it could help them have more fun, or temporarily escape their problems. So when we look at this, again, this was done over the time period of 2010 to 2017. And we're talking about teens who need to temporarily escape their problems. Imagine what that is today after our experience with COVID. So if we see that this advertisement, that this is what it means and this is what happens when kids see it, we can only expect that that's even more abundant today with what's happening. But it's not just billboards, it's everywhere. So this is a bus that we saw in New York. And there was a lady that was yelling out the window to come try these different flavors of marijuana flavored candies that they had. It's called World of Weeds. Up here in the top corner, probably where my video face is, let me move it, you have something called the Chiba Hut. And this is a restaurant. Different restaurants named this throughout the United States, and they infuse their food with marijuana. On the bottom, just t-shirts that you can buy on social media. This one, it says hanging with your buds. And then this was just another picture I found on my social media. And it's just about, we talk a lot about journaling when it comes to our wellness and mental health well-being. And so this was a journal that you can use when you're high. So these are just examples of how prevalent this culture is and how they're trying to normalize it through every aspect of our lives. These are different convenience stores that have the neon signs that are showing that they sell these products. This middle picture is on campus of a university. So right here is the bus stop for University of Tampa, here near where I live. And you can see there is a marijuana doctor sign that's there. And then this is just a t-shirt that was sold in a trendy boutique that's near my neighborhood. So in our state and in many states, if you are a medical marijuana patient, you are allowed to have a caregiver. And that caregiver is the person that acquires your marijuana for you. So this t-shirt is kind of playing off that, saying, who's your caregiver? And again, with the pot leaf on, just making it really obvious. So last year in the state of Florida, we hosted the Super Bowl. And near Tampa Stadium, they had all different kind of events all weekend long that were family friendly that you could participate in. And so this was right next door to our stadium. So if you walked a block over, you could participate in all of this Super Bowl fan fun week stuff. And then right here in the parking lot is a big bus, Dr. Cannabis, and promoting marijuana use, giving out samples, and associated with a dispensary you can kind of see on the tablecloth there called Move. Again, this is illegal in the state of Florida, but nobody is enforcing it. And this is what the families walked by when they were participating in all of our fun things going on with the Super Bowl. These are some other things that our youth are bombarded with on social media. So she has recently recanted this, but we all know who Demi Lovato is. She's a famous pop singer, very well known to our adolescent and young adults. She's been very forthcoming with her problems with substance use and the fact that she has a substance use disorder. She's been sober and has relapsed different times. And a few years ago, she overdosed and almost died from her substance use disorder, and came out of the rehabilitation center and was very open about her process. And when she was interviewed, she introduced the theory of California sober. And what she meant by this was that, yes, she was in her recovery and was not using alcohol or opioids, the heroin, the drugs that she was using before, but she was still using marijuana. And so we had this big trend of this movement toward California sober. And so imagine the message this sends to our youth. One, that marijuana must be safe because even if you're in recovery, you can use it. But also that here we have somebody who was so open and so such a role model to kids that are struggling, young adults that are struggling with a substance use disorder. They see through her that relapse could be part of the disease, and there is hope in recovery, but then she's sending this mixed message about also still using marijuana. A few months ago, she did come out and recant this and say that she found that this was a slippery slope for her and that she is not using marijuana now and is 100% sober and not California sober. But really the damage is done. This is a concept that many people are identifying with and replicating. And again, another way to normalize marijuana. I have a few slides I want to show you about CBD. Again, CBD is legal in the United States because we passed a federal farm act a couple years ago that legalized hemp, and CBD as part of the marijuana plant that is not have any kind of ability to get you high, isn't the component that gets you high, is now legal. So I found this quote from a scientist that I thought was just great. It says, consumers are participating in one of the largest uncontrolled clinical trials in history, and nobody knows what it is they're taking. So this was somebody who was an investigator with the National Institute of Health, and he's the president of the International Cannabinoid Research Society. And he says it's scary because, again, this is an unregulated product, and we really don't know what it is. It's in beauty products, it's in nutritional supplements, again, it's in drinks, in different granola bars and snacks. It's being infused into cocktails and alcoholic beverages. And it's being vaped. And so I think that this is, when we look at what our youth are doing, again, vaping, as you guys all probably know, is just a very easy way for our youth to use products undetected because, again, you don't have that smell of the burning. So research suggests that CBD is partially transformed into THC during that vaping or e-cigarette use. And so based on this particular study that was done, it says that when consumed in e-cigarettes, CBD bears all the dangers related to the psychoactive component because something happens chemically when the product is when CBD is burned at, or is that is risen to these high temperatures in order to be vaped. So this is something that is sold over the counter that could potentially be mind altering. And again, we know that THC has impacts to the still developing brain. So for our youth, this is very dangerous. So the next few slides, I just want to talk about what the impacts are of use for our mental health. So we've gone over what the landscape looks like in the US, where these products are sold, what these products are, and how they're being marketed, and what the prevalence is of them in our society. So I'm going to just talk about the mental health aspects because we don't have a lot of time. And I think that this is probably, to me, the most important part of the impacts of marijuana use on adolescents and young adults. And I say that because, when we look at why people use, why youth turn to different substances like marijuana, a lot of times it's to escape, it's to make them feel better. It's because they have feelings of depression or anxiety, and they think that this is going to help them. But also, because of what we've all gone through with COVID, we know our adolescents and our young adults and us adults have a lot more mental health impacts because of what we've been through. And for our youth, some of them, it's the first time in their lifetime that they're experiencing grief, that they're experiencing isolation from their friends, that they're experiencing this aloneness. So we see that they're turning to these different products. So marijuana has been associated with psychosis. So this particular ongoing study, it was youth who used marijuana just 5 times or more had a 6.5-fold higher risk for developing psychosis. Another study, and both of these are sourced at the bottom, found a 3-fold higher risk among daily users compared to non-users. And among users of high potency marijuana, which was defined as 10% or more of THC, the risk of psychotic disorders was 5 times higher. When we look at depression and anxiety, there was a study of outpatients with depression. And in this study, they found that marijuana use was significantly associated with worse recovery from depression and anxiety symptoms and mental health functioning compared with patients who were not using. And then a study in New Zealand found that young people who used marijuana 3 times or more by the age of 18 were more likely to have a depressive disorder by the age of 26, even after the other use of drugs was controlled for. Some more on depression and anxiety. A 15-year follow-up of an adult community sample of almost 2,000 participants in the US showed that marijuana use increased the risk of a major depressive episode at a follow-up by 4-fold, that marijuana use was specifically associated with an increase in suicidal ideation and the inability to feel pleasure. This is significant when we think about the reasons why people might be using in the first place. And an Australian study showed a dose effect relationship between the use of marijuana and anxiety or depression in a large cohort of 14 and 15-year-olds that they followed for over 7 years. And what they found is they found higher rates of anxiety or depression according to the frequency with which the marijuana was used. And they found that the link was stronger for women than for young men. Now, this is the first time that the sex difference had been found that wasn't found in other studies. Suicide. So unfortunately, I know a great group of parents who, I say unfortunately because I only know them because of the devastating loss that they've had, that their children have died by suicide after experiencing marijuana-induced psychosis. So this is something, because of these super high potent products that we're seeing now, that is becoming a growing concern and that is being talked a lot more about in the media lately. So when we look at suicide, there was a 2014 meta-analysis of 3 previous long-running studies that included nearly 4,000 participants who were daily adolescent users. And they found that of daily adolescent users were 18 times more likely to become dependent on the drug, 7 times more likely to attempt suicide, and 8 times more likely to use other drugs in the future. A 2012 Australian twin study showed that people who smoked marijuana before the age of 17, and again, we know that the brain isn't fully developed until our early 20s, mid 20s. So it's really significant when we hear this data and we see this research on how these substances, especially marijuana, impact the developing brain. That people who use marijuana before the age of 17 were 3.5 times more likely to attempt suicide than those who started smoking later in life. Again, think about that developing brain. And people who were dependent on marijuana had a higher risk of experiencing major depression and suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So these drugs are linked to our mental health. Marijuana use, and this is a new one. This one just came out in 2021. Nora Volkov was part of this from from NIDA, and they found that marijuana use may be associated with suicidality in young adults. So this was an analysis of survey data from more than 280,000 young adults aged 18 to 35 that showed that marijuana use was associated with an increased risk of suicide thoughts, suicide plans, and a suicide attempt. And these associations remained regardless of whether somebody was also experiencing depression, and the risks were greater for women than for men. So this duplicates a little bit of what we heard about in a study a couple slides ago. So what are the challenges? I mean, I think that by some of the pictures and some of the things you saw, you can see what the challenges are. But there are so many challenges associated with these policy trends. So as hard as you're working in your community to educate people on the harms when it comes to mental health, when it comes to physical health, when it comes to public safety, these shifts in policy sometimes push back on what you're doing. So you have the movement from decriminalization to depenalization. Now that's something that most people in drug demand reduction support. We support depenalization over decriminalization. We want the penalties to be changed so that people can get the help that they need instead of just being in prison. You have these shifts to medical marijuana. And we know what we've seen with the prescription drug epidemic and the opioid epidemic is that when the word medical is put in front of something, there's the assumption that it's safe. And that's what our youth hear. And then we have in the US and around the globe, places that are moving to full recreational marijuana. And you see what that looks like in the US. And so you could assume that the same is going to happen where you're at. You're going to have that marketing, you're going to have that, pressure. And so one of the challenges is that perceived risk. When you see that something is legal and you see that something is a medicine, you just don't associate, or our youth don't associate the same risk level with the use. So according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, only about 1/4 of people aged 12 or older in 2020 perceived a great risk of harm from smoking marijuana once or twice a week. When we looked at young adults between the ages of 18 to 25, they were less likely than adolescents or adults over the age of 26 to perceive great harm from marijuana smoking weekly. So we have that perceived risk dropping. And like I said, for youth perspective, legal equals safe or safer. States that have legalized recreational marijuana as of 2018 report rates of first use among adolescents are 12 to 63% higher than the national average. Again, this isn't rocket science. If you live in an area where something is legal and it's being marketed and you see these signs and you are constantly bombarded with messages that this is safe, use is going to go up. We have challenges. So since COVID-related social distancing began, the frequency of adolescent alcohol and marijuana use has increased. Predictors include greater peer reputation concerns, self-reported popularity, and depressive symptoms. Interestingly enough, we were able to see how our youth were using during this time period in the US. Almost 50% of them were using alone. Because they were being physically distanced from other people. 31% of them were using how we are communicating right now. They were using technology to be present with their peers and using over Zooms or face-to-face Googles and Facebook and things like that. So they were using technology in order to use these substances with their peers. And then even though we were in what was considered a lockdown during the pandemic, still a little more than 20% of them were able to get out and use face-to-face. So what do we do now? We have all this information, we have these policies that are changing. As preventionists, how do we move forward in this changing landscape? So there's so much that we can do policy-wise and just primary prevention-wise. So policy-wise, we can really look at how these products are marketed and the advertising that is allowed. We can demand that our marketing and advertising is not appealing to kids, that there isn't unsolicited social media pop-up ads, and that there's reduced signage in our community, very similar to what we've done with tobacco. We can ban or reduce the amount of these places that are able to open and operate within our community. We can restrict the products that are allowed for sale. So many states in the US are now looking at these edibles. They're now looking at these soda pops, and they're going to try to say what can and can't be sold. But they're also looking at the THC potency. And many states are considering potency caps because, like I said, there's so much coming out right now that's showing that these high potency products are directly related to worse mental health and outcomes, related to suicide attempts. So we have some leverage on how we can work with lawmakers to hopefully limit these things and make them less appealing to our youth. We need to increase our educational efforts on the risks, especially when it comes to mental health for both youth, young adults, and adults. If we know people are using and trending toward these products to make them feel better, we as a society need to give them other ways to feel better, safe ways to feel better. We need to promote drug-free events and activities more in your communities, family-friendly things, maybe things, some of the things that we do in our communities are called Friday Night Done Rights, and they're activities for youth to come and have a really great time without the use of any alcohol or other drugs, and really promote health and wellness. So a lot of times when we talk about substance abuse prevention, we talk about drug education, but prevention isn't just about drug education. Yes, people need to understand what drugs are out there and what the harms of those drugs can be. But also, if we're just promoting health and wellness in our communities, that goes a long way to help build protective factors that will reduce the availability of people using these substances in the first place. Coming to the end, I want to show you a slide that was produced after Dr. DuPont from the Institute of Behavior and Health and Dr. Bertha Madras from Harvard Medical looked at all of the surveys for the national drug use and health here in the US. And what they showed is that teen marijuana use is directly associated with higher use of other drugs. So what you see here on the left-hand side is if an adolescent did not use, we're looking at adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17, when they had no past month use of marijuana, the likelihood of them using alcohol, binge alcohol use, heavy alcohol use, cigarette use, or other illicit drug use was really low. But when we look at the right-hand side of this chart, these are kids, adolescents, 12 to 17, who did use marijuana in the past month. And look at the difference when it comes to alcohol use, especially when it comes to other illicit drug use. No marijuana use, other illicit drug use was at 2.2%. Yes to marijuana use in the last 30 days, we're at a little more than 20%. These are significant differences. Now, I will tell you what I didn't do, but what would have looked exactly the same is if I replaced the word marijuana with alcohol or tobacco. So one of the three, all of the three, two of the three, the graphs would look almost the same. So what that tells us is that if we can keep our youth from using alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana till they're 18, till they're 21, the likelihood of them ever having problematic use in the future, that doesn't mean that they're not going to use in the future, but having problematic use in the future significantly diminishes. And this is information we need to get out to our parents, to the adults, to our communities. And we can do that through a program that Dr. DuPont created. It's a prevention initiative developed by the Institute of Behavioral Health, and it's centered on the health goal of abstaining from use of alcohol, nicotine, or marijuana or other drugs for youth and under 21 for reasons of health. So I encourage you to go onto this website, check out the resources that they have, use that, create one of your own, but get out this message of this one choice of not using any drugs. So I thank you so much for your time. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person or live. I hope you have the best conference ever, and I hope that you got something out of this presentation. I'm would be so happy if you reached out and contacted me with any questions or comments or concerns, any way that Drug-Free America can help you in your prevention or policy efforts moving forward. We would be so happy to do so. My email is here and my website is here. And I thank you for your time. And I thank you for all the work that you're doing in your communities to keep our youth safe from drugs. Thank you.